Hello, my name is Loretta Favre, and I'd like to thank you for sharing your time with me. This video is a recreation of a talk I gave to a group of social work students at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland on October 13th, 2021. I was invited by their professor and my friend Julia James to give this talk. Thank you again, Julia, for inviting me to share this amazing project with your students. The Forgiveness Project was a community art project funded by the Ontario Arts Council in partnership with Unity Health Toronto, which operates St. Joseph Health Centre. I collaborated with Robin Alexander, who is an addiction counselor and mindful meditation teacher at St. Joe's. Together, we delivered 8 weekly Zoom workshops to 11 participants from the addiction recovery program. The aim of the project was to help participants overcome feelings of shame from their past by forming meaningful connections and working collaboratively to build a work of art. What you see here is a detailed shot of the finished piece created that the group created together. To begin, I will show you the finished work of art that the participants created, and I'll give you some context to the project by sharing a bit about myself and how the project came into being. I'll also give an overview of how we executed the workshops, and I'll share a mindful drawing exercise that we did with the group. And I'll also show you how we measured the impact of the project on the participants and share a little bit of their feedback. And I'll answer any questions that you may have. That you can list your questions in the comments section below. So this is the paper tapestry, or paper quilt, as I sometimes call it. 5 men and 8 women participated in the making of the tapestry, including me and Robin Alexander. The piece is made up of 122 hand-printed squares that have been torn and stitched back together. The squares were then stitched together in rows, and then the rows were stitched together to create this crazy quilt that's 61 inches wide and 51 inches tall. Tearing through our creative output and stitching it back together is a metaphor for tearing through our shame and mending it with self-compassion and forgiveness. This is the concept behind the whole project. I am a fiber artist, which means I like to work with plant and animal fibers such as paper, cotton, linen, wool, or silk. I also love to dance, and daily dancing is part of my self-care practice that brings me about 5 minutes of joy every day. I think in a way it's a celebration of life and also gratitude that I can still move my body the way I want at the age that I am. And it also helps me maintain my sobriety. Addiction has been a big part of my life for a very long time. Alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, sugar are the substances that I have abused over the years. I've given up all these things many times in my life, and I've had many relapses as well. I've managed to keep nicotine out of my life for many, many years now, and alcohol for the last 3.5 years. When I quit drinking just over 3.5 years ago, my family doctor referred me to addiction services at St. Joe's. This is where I met Robin, who became my addiction counselor. After a bit of coaxing, she got me to join her weekly recovery group meetings. She also encouraged me to use my art practice as a tool for my recovery. When I joined the recovery group, I was taking a business course for artists run by Anne Ray. Part of this course required me to look back at my life and describe 3 of my most painful moments. I then had to decipher the common feeling I had during those 3 painful moments. And for me, it was shame. I then had to tap into my higher self and get her to comfort the me who was feeling shame. And the most common words she said to me were to forgive yourself. And as many of you may know, that is much easier said than done. I realized that these feelings of shame and not being good enough were being reflected in my art practice. At the time, I was making prints using hand-cut stencils from Japanese paper. I was constantly trying to achieve the cleanest possible print, and if it wasn't perfect, then I would put it in my reject bin. The reject bin grew quite big until I decided I need to make something from these supposed rejects and turn them into something new. So what you see here is the contents of my reject bin, which is lots of little prints and stencils, an array of different colors. And for whatever reason, I didn't think they measured up. So they got tossed. It took some courage, but I started cutting up my rejects and sort of mixing them up and puzzling them back together. It was a very liberating experience. Stitching these pieces together was like mending or healing the pain from the past. This new practice became a metaphor for healing my shame from the past. In this piece, instead of cutting, I tore and hand-stitched the pieces together. Because of the simplicity of this piece, I realized I could share the process with my recovery group. If it helped me heal, it would likely help them too. The skills required to make it could be easily transferred to someone with very little or no art making experience. I proposed the idea of a community art project to Robin, that together we would bring art and mindfulness to the recovery community at St. Joe's. Robin got Unity Health to agree to partner with me, and I applied for a grant from the Ontario Arts Council. I received the grant at the end of 2019, and Robin and I had scheduled the workshops to begin in the spring of 2020. Of course, the pandemic hit, and I couldn't figure out a way to deliver the project virtually because much of the creative process depended on using a communal pot of melted wax. I was ready to give the money back when early this year I figured out a different approach that didn't require communal materials. So this is the art making kit that each of the participants received before the project began. Some of the participants came to my studio to pick them up. Some received theirs by mail and some were hand delivered. So this is the box that contains all the tools. So these were the contents of the box. They contain the tools required to do the artwork with the exception of the inks, needles, and thread. We needed to determine our color palette before we could start mixing and distributing the ink and purchasing thread. So what you see here is the gel press, which we used for printing, as well as a brayer for rolling on the ink, mark making tools, a journal, and about 30 sheets of Japanese paper called kozuke, which was cut into 6-inch by 6-inch squares. We structured the project in the same way as Robin structures the recovery group meetings, so that everyone would feel right at home from the get-go. Robin always starts our recovery meetings with an opening meditation, followed by a check-in from everyone in the group. And then we take a break, come back, and have a discussion based on a certain topic, and then we would close with a meditation. The difference with these group sessions for the project is that we shortened the check-in time and added the discussion topic before the break. After the break, we did the art making, had a debrief, and then a closing meditation. Not only is Robin an addiction counselor and mindful meditation teacher, she is also a Kundalini yoga teacher. Her guided meditations often included breathing exercises and readings that related to our discussion topics and art making practice. As she does in regular recovery group meetings, Robin researched and led our discussions. Topics we discussed included shame, the inner critic, radical acceptance, self-compassion, courage, and joy. So Robin wasn't able to join me in Newfoundland for this talk. So I'm just going to share a quote from our press release that she shared. By weaving meaningful recovery discussions and ancient mindfulness practices into the various art teachings, participants can more easily access areas of themselves to release pain, shame, and traumas. In typical recovery modalities, often these areas are too guarded or protected to be released. But in this space of safety and creativity, we see incredible shifts in healing and recovery. We continually foster and practice self-compassion, awareness, and connection, which are all essential to substance use recovery. Participants reap immediate benefit of having a creative outlet to express their feelings, as well as connecting and collaborating with others toward a common goal. The new skills acquired lead to more creative exploration, self-forgiveness, and confidence. So after our meditation, we did a check-in, which often involved feedback from the homework that was assigned. What impressed me about the group was their commitment to the project. They actually did the homework, and they shared photos with me of the work that they did. Homework included mindful art exercises, journaling, printmaking, and stitching. Many of the participants commented on how the homework really helped their overall feelings of well-being. Some even did the activities with their partners and children as a way of de-stressing. I discovered a woman named Cynthia Hawk, whose YouTube channel called The Mindful Creative Muse offers really simple, mindful art activities to de-stress or to get inspired. I had the group do several of these exercises at home and in our group sessions. And one of them I have adapted for this talk, which I'll share with you in just a moment. So it would be really great if you could pause this video and grab a piece of paper, some kind of template where you can draw a circle, or you can draw a circle freehand, as well as a pen or colored pencil, markers, whatever. For every activity we did, whether it was doodling, writing, printmaking, tearing, or stitching, I made a demo video to go along with it. So I'm going to take you through one of these little demo videos that I made just for you. So if you have the materials in front of you, we'll get started. If not, just pause this video to get your pen and something to draw a circle with. So with your piece of paper, you're going to take your template to draw a circle, or you can draw your circle freehand. It does not have to be perfect. And one thing great about this whole project is it's really celebrating imperfection. So we're really trying to avoid this, striving to make everything just so. And so this is a timed exercise for 1 minute. And you'll start by drawing your breath. So as you inhale, draw a line up. And as you exhale, draw a line down. Inhale up and exhale, draw your line down. And when you feel relaxed and comfortable, you can take that line anywhere you want, within the mandala or outside of it. And to just help you focus, this exercise requires you to keep your pen on the paper. So we're not lifting this pen at all. We're just keeping the flow of ink across the page without thinking too much about what it is that we're drawing. This is just a very simple mark making exercise, mindful mark making. And so the minute's up, you put your pen down, and now we're going to do this same exercise but for 2 minutes and working on top of the drawing that we just did. Again, you can start anywhere on the page. You can start within the mandala, outside of it. You can draw the breath if you feel the need to get back into the breathing and relaxing. And you might want to think about changing up the lines that you've been making. So if you were making curvy lines, maybe try making straight lines, or drawing on top of the drawing that you just did, or filling in areas with ink. And again, we're doing this without judgment. We're just connecting our hand with the pen, that's letting the ink flow wherever it wants to go, wherever we take it on the page. And also, there is no right or wrong way of doing this exercise. Just the activity of putting pen to paper and making marks is all that's required. And being very mindful of these marks that we're making. And if any time you get stuck, it's always good just to go back to drawing the breath, and it allows you to keep the pen going. So that's the 2 minutes. You can put your pen down. And at this point in the talk in Newfoundland, I asked the group how many of them really loved the work that they just created. And the response was, there was one person who really loved what they had drawn, and many of the rest of the group were very judgmental of what they had created, and there was a bit of anxiety as well. So I feel free to write in the comments below of how you felt about doing this exercise. So I did a very similar activity with our group. This was the first mindful doodling activity that we did, and it was the layer 1 of mark making on our 30 sheets of paper. And I think one of the things that makes this project so special is that people aren't afraid to talk about the shame they feel about creating art. At the beginning of the project, they were all willing to share that they are not artists, that they can't draw, that they were never good at art in school, etc., etc. During this exercise, some people expressed anxiety about drawing the circle, and worried that it wasn't perfect and wanted to start over, or they felt that they were doing the exercise wrong. Does any of this sound familiar? I think this is really good, that people can share these feelings about their creativity, because part of overcoming shame is shining a light on it. And once you do this, it is a lot easier to release it. So when the group is put into a situation where there are no expectations, just a few simple rules to help focus the mind, they can feel free to explore their creativity without judgment. The process helps us tap into our deeper self-judgments that go beyond art making, and it helps us release them. So again, this is layer one, and I think once everybody shared their creations, the whole idea of not being good enough was starting. They were starting to let go of that. Oh. In week 2, we continued our mark making exercises, but we added a cathartic writing component to grieve our shame. A writing demo video and a guided meditation preceded this activity, just to prepare everyone for the activity. Participants were encouraged to continue this mark making throughout the week before the next meeting. So this is still part of layer 1, but it may have been on one sheet of paper or many sheets of paper, depending on the participant and how much they wanted to doodle and make marks and journal. So the night before each workshop, the group was emailed the handout and the handout for our discussion topic, as well as a photo of the materials that they were required for the following day. This helped keep the group organized and prepared for each session. And they were always prepared. I was really impressed with their commitment. So this is a photo that they were sent before we began the printmaking portion of the project, and adding the second and third layers of mark making to our sheets of paper. Writing and doodling was the part of the project that required emotional strength and vulnerability. But the printmaking sessions were pure joy for everyone. The Jelly Plate is such a wonderful tool. It's so easy to use and it yields great results. Participants printed on top of their doodles and handwritten pages, not to cover them up, but to add another layer of experience to the one that went before, a more joyful and fun experience. So this is the setup of one of our participants made for herself, which I absolutely love, so organized. So this is her home studio. All of the participants sent me photos of their home studios, and they also sent their artwork as well. Everyone was so proud of themselves and what they created. It really was a joy to see them so happy. This is a photo I took after everyone completed their first layer of printmaking. In the next session, they printed on top of their prints, creating yet another layer of meaning, exploration, and creativity. They were also encouraged to continue printmaking before the next session. After week 4, when we finished our printmaking, I asked everyone to choose 9 of their prints for a ceremonial tearing through our shame in week 5. Robin guided us through a meditation before we did the deed. For some, this was difficult because they had grown attached to their creations, but it was an important step in detaching ourselves from the past, whether it was good or bad. Each of the 9 sheets were torn into 3 pieces, so they were left with 27 strips of paper. It was important that the torn sheets of paper be waxed. It provided stability and made the paper translucent so that both sides of the paper could be used in the final composition. The waxing had to be done in my studio, which meant everyone would have to come to my studio to get their torn prints waxed. After I waxed their strips of paper, they were asked to leave behind 6 pieces that would be shared with the next person who came to get their strips of paper waxed. In some cases, this process was done through the mail or through hand deliveries. In week 6 and 7, we were composing our final squares and stitching them together. Composition is one of the things that I struggle with. My inner critic always has a lot to say during this process. So I asked Robin to take us through a meditation to silence the inner critic while we composed our squares before stitching them together. Stitching was probably the hardest part for people to grasp, since only 1 or 2 had experienced threading a needle and stitching, but they all did it beautifully, and they seamlessly integrated the 6 pieces from their fellow group members into their own work, symbolizing the connection we shared together. Knowing that the stitches didn't have to be perfect also helped take the pressure off. The only requirement was that the stitching hold the squares together. That's it. And I just showed them 2 stitches, a straight stitch and a slip stitch, or anyways, not sure, but these are the 2 stitches. So these are the 9 squares made by one of our participants, and he really got creative with the stitching, which thrilled me and all of the other participants. I just love the way the participants got really creative and really took the exploration very seriously. During the week before our final session, participants came to my studio and placed their squares on a grid on my wall. Some mailed them in, and some hand delivered them, or some we picked them up and then placed them on the grid with the others. In our last session, we had a celebration of all that we accomplished and admired our not quite finished tapestry. This photo gives you an idea of the scale we were working with. The squares ended up filling the entire space between the green strips of masking tape. In the following weeks, several of the participants dropped by to help me stitch the squares together, which was really nice to connect and chat and stitch in a really casual setting. For me, it was a great way to end the project. At the beginning of most recovery group meetings, Robin asks us to complete a self-assessment wheel. So we wanted to do the same for this project as well. So with the help of Julia, the professor, we created a special one just for this group that reflected many of our topics of discussion. We had them complete one at the beginning of the project and one at the end of the project. They were asked not to refer to the first wheel when they were completing the second wheel. They completed each area of the wheel, with 10 being the highest level of well-being and 1 being the lowest. As you can see, there was an increase in this participant's score by the end of the project. So it's hard for me to see this, but you can see here definitely an increase from the beginning to the end of the project. I compiled everyone's score from the first and last sessions and determined an overall increase in the participants' well-being of 20%. I realize this isn't a super scientific study, but it did help Robin and I gauge the overall impact of the project on the participants. We received a lot of incredible feedback from our group throughout the project. Too many to list here, so I'm just sharing one from one of our very eloquent participants. They say, "I have been so moved by this experience. It continues to unearth an evolving, deeper understanding of who I am and how I came to be in this place in my life at this moment in time. Recovery is work that is both difficult and beautiful. Our project reflects this contrast." And, she's, or he, I'm not sure who it was, is so right. It really does reflect both the difficult and the beautiful. The agreement with St. Joe's is that the tapestry will be installed somewhere at the hospital. When I gave this talk in October, the tapestry was installed at the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador in St. John's. It was part of my solo exhibition called The Art of Forgiveness. It just returned back to Toronto earlier this week. It's the beginning of December now, and hopefully this tapestry will be installed at the hospital in the new year. The self-assessment wheel and the written feedback we received was collected within the week the program ended. Everybody was feeling really high from the project, but then life goes back to normal, and sometimes our old demons resurface. My hope is that our participants will use the art and mindfulness exercises we did to help them get through these ups and downs of daily life. What I love about the project is its intrinsic value. Everything we created in our 8 weeks together is embedded in this piece. It is utterly unique. Once it hangs in the hospital, it will be a perpetual reminder to people in recovery that meaningful connections and healing can happen. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. I've also listed links to all of the organizations and artists that I have referenced in this talk as well. Thanks so much for spending time with me.